Good day, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to something a little different. This video is going to be a bit of an opinionated video, and I'm not going to expect everyone to agree with me, but I think it's only fair that in times like these, that we discuss things that are clearly on a lot of people's minds. And no, I'm not talking about when is Space Mom finally getting those breast implants, or when is Barlas finally going to put on his goddamn pants. No. In this video, I want to take an objective look at the current state of Warframe, expressing my personal opinions and observations of the game and its development, and how it's been evolving over the past 6 or 7 years. The good, the bad, and what I think can be done to improve the bad, and to also then celebrate the positives. And above all else, I want it to be stated, this is not a hate video. That would not be constructive. This is a video based on constructive feedback to propagate a positive influence and to encourage a form of debate for all of us to discuss upon. Not your typical video of me shouting, Kuva! No, this is a bit more of a serious video. So if you're looking for me shouting Kuva every 5 seconds, I would advise going and watching another video. I would also like to just quickly state, I don't hate Warframe because of this video. If anything, this video is one made out of how much I love this game. I love Warframe. This community has been my home and full-time job now for 6 years, and is one of the reasons why I feel like I have some level of intrigue with being able to make this video, because it comes from a place of knowledge and having seen how the game has evolved in its very infancy to where it is now. This video is merely one made out of passion and wanting to see what's best to see the game prosper and grow. So, as with anything, when we want to see something improved on, we need this kind of forum. Rather than ranting and raving like lunatics, I want this video to be one that can aid as a forum for us all to channel our thoughts and passion through. And as a disclaimer, opinions are like assholes. We all have them, but not all of them can smell like freshly cleaned roses. My point being is, let's be respectful of each other's opinions, shall we? Even if somebody in the comments has a completely differing opinion to you, if I have a differing opinion, let's not hate each other for this. Let's respect the opinions we have. This video will not be all doom and gloom, mind you, because I think it's worth looking at both the good and the bad when it comes to how Warframe is right now, and not just be one of those videos prattling on for 20 minutes about how shit the game is just to exploit clicks and views. Because that's just not constructive, nor will it accurately help with fixing the concerns. And let's remember, DE is just the studio. The people who work there are human. We need to be respectful and respect them as people, and make sure we tackle concerns and critique in a manner that doesn't make us seem like high school bullies. Let's start with what the concerns are, shall we? Let's start with basing this video off of some well-known facts. DE has always been a company that bases its public image off of being that one studio that defied all the odds, that succeeded where everyone else said they would fail, that through the power of perseverance and community relation rose above all the odds to get to where they did. DE have always proudly spouted that the community is the key, and that for the last 7 years, the community have led the charge in how Warframe has been shaped. So why is it that for the past couple years especially, it seems like that notion has fallen to the wayside quite so heavily? Well, it's safe to say that Warframe is in a bit of a weird position at the current point in time. And at the moment, with Twitch numbers being at their lowest ever recorded state, and that's also coming from someone who's played this game and been in the directory every single day for the last 5.5 years, I've seen the lows, I've seen the highs, but never have I really seen the Twitch directory quite as low as it is now. And then compounding that with just the general lack of engagement with the community in the game itself, it's safe to say that there are some concerns here numbers-wise that need to be addressed. I think it's very important to iterate something here, as it's vital to realize that the success of a game is not based on the popularity of it via the Twitch numbers. And really, Warframe as a whole has never been more consistent in terms of its overall player base, especially if you go by the Steam numbers. Now, it's not as high as it was a couple of years back, certainly at the launch of PoE, but it's also nowhere near as low as it was before that either. At its current state, Warframe is in a very nice buttery middle ground. So why does Warframe right now feel so hollow? In short, the first major issue that relates to this is there seems to be a massive disconnect between the devs and the community. Whereas before, in the past, DE and the community used to be much more forward-facing and open-ended about the connectivity between decision-making and the way the game was shaped based on that, and based on the feedback from the community and content creators. Nowadays, it seems like there just doesn't seem to be nearly as much of a community ear open on DE's end of things. Compounding that, we also have a major issue with sloppy updates. Updates that seem rushed, unwanted, or just generally out of touch with the community's intrigue and what they've been begging for. So really, to summarize, the problems are twofold: community disconnect and what can only be summarized as DE punching outside of what they have the assets to punch for. We're going to start by looking at this sentiment of disconnection. And the sentiment of disconnection is specifically felt through the content creators. Although there is that sentiment felt through the entire community, it's often the content creators who are the ones who are the most notable ones who represent this. And these content creators are, by all rights, some of the people who are the best in terms of critiquing and giving constructive feedback on the game, as we tend to be the ones who are on the front line, engaging with the people who play the game on a day-by-day basis. And this is often then why you get these kind of videos where frustrated content creators voice their minds as to how the game is going. We see that Warframe is jetting down the rapids, going through rocky, choppy water when there is clearly calm and easier path that could have been much easier to go for, which is why there's a level of frustration with how much of a disconnect there now is between us and the developers. Not saying that this is a mandatory thing that needs to be done, but as stated earlier, DE have always pushed for this notion of connectivity between the people who play and the content creators alike. So this is where the dichotomy lies. DE has their own ideas and visions for the game, and we all respect that. And for the fledgling years of the game, I'd say most, if not all, of the community was on board with how the game transitioned. Always delivering nice, small, constant updates and patches that innovated on the concept of Warframe's foundations. But over time, as gaming as a whole has evolved, Warframe has as well, and their desire to want to meet the demand of the ever-changing world of gaming, and alongside the ever-increasing demand to meet the standards of their shareholders. And we being only able to see things from a second-hand perspective often means we don't get the full picture, which is why there ends up being a lot of jumping to conclusion and finger-pointing, rather than just trying to give DE the chance to do what they have to do. Sometimes jumping at a decision the second it's released and chastising it does nothing but deter a content creator from trying to innovate on it. An example with the Railjack and how people jumped at it being a bad update due to the issues it launched with. It becomes a bit more transparent to realize that the decision making on DE's end is never an easy one. And I want this video to be more of a way to show things from their perspective rather than just looking at it from a linear fashion. And really, you have to look at it from this perspective. DE are doing what they have to do to make ends meet and to make money. At the end of the day, DE are a business, and they do need to make those ends meet to keep the development going. And those increasing demands have very evidently been seen in DE's constant yearn for more dynamic updates that stray from what made Warframe Warframe. You need look only as far as Railjack to see that the ideas they have for Warframe are no longer fueled with any form of consensus of what the community wants, because nobody really wanted Railjack. There could have been countless other things those resources that went into Railjack could have been used on that fit Warframe's themes far better. Let's face it, and although Railjack is tabled to be something that's fun once it's fully realized, this then shows exactly where the problems lie. The fact that they were willing to put all their eggs and all their assets into a project that nobody from the community really cared for in the first place. That is the disconnect. That is not listening to the community. And although having an idea is a good thing, sometimes there has to be some semblance of listening to what the community actually wants, because otherwise it just ends up being a leap of faith. And leap of faiths are good for a studio that has the ability to fall. If DE made an update that fell completely and all their assets and all their hopes were put on that update, the game would die. Now, thankfully, Railjack hasn't been a complete flop. The idea is sound. The idea is great. It's a cool idea. It's a neat idea. It just needs to be more integrally lined up with how Warframe is as a game to affect your overall gameplay loop. Because as it stands right now, Railjack, just by numbers alone, has not been the best of successes. But thankfully, due to the established nature of Warframe, it hasn't been something that's hit DE too tremendously hard as of right now. But I can guarantee you, it'll be very interesting to see how Railjack is in a year. And this is why I want people to realize how important it is to give a developer time. Yes, an update that's released a bit early and maybe a bit sloppy right off the bat may not be good, but you never know what that update might end up being in a year's time. So back to something we mentioned earlier, and honestly, this is probably my biggest concern in all of this, and really is the big issue that compounds on everything else, as well as the railjack we mentioned about, but as well as the disconnect. And if we could correlate all of our concerns, they would all stem back to this in reality. DE have become too ambitious. They set their sights too high. We need look only back at the whiteboard from last year in their dev streams, and we will see that DE wants the world, but can only have enough strength to lift a small rock, if you catch my meaning. DE has aspirations that they simply cannot manage, and that leads us to getting Railjack in the shit-sorry state that it was launched in. Lackluster, bland, and boring. Lackluster patches and updates that just don't seem to meet expectations, compounding on that, like with Scarlet Spear, and that in of itself tells a story that DE are their own worst enemy. They create hype around so many unique and dynamic ideas that on paper seem amazing. These updates then get DE laid and pushed back a la the New War, having been in development for now for over 2 years. That hype then leads to community expectations being far above what ends up coming, a la with Scarlet Spear. Again, Scarlet Spear being a nice little idea, but the trouble being is people were hoping for something huge with Scarlet Spear. But in reality, although as an idea and as an execution it was okay, it was nowhere near the grandeur of what people were hoping for. DE are juggling so many projects at this point that they can't tangibly put enough resources into one to make it worth playing right off the bat. Railjack being the best example here in how much of a skeleton structure it was released in. The fact that in its current state, Railjack is nothing more than a dull flight simulator where you kill a few ships, and that's really about it, does scream true to this notion. And the ideals of having aspirations far outside of their means, just look at Nightwave. That replacement for the alerts that was clearly unsustainable, that in theory was a great addition and by concept alone was a good idea. But by notion alone, we can see that DE just do not have the assets to keep it going. And with the next season, it will likely be the last season of Nightwave we get before it gets transitioned into something different that is more manageable for what they have assets for. The TLDR here is, DE are not listening as much as they used to. The only time they seem to listen is when their public face of being that community-friendly developer is put in jeopardy. They are too ambitious, through having too many projects on the go and projects that just don't come across as being connected enough with what the community is basically begging for. There's other stuff, but really for the most of us, I think these couple of subjects are the biggest assets that people have issues with, and the main issues tackling people's mind with Warframe currently. And I did talk about this in a previous video, so I'll just briefly put it here because I think it is a very apt thing that needs to be discussed, is the new player experience is in need of some love. And there's a bit of an analogy I made in my previous video where the game's experience as a whole is basically a pillar. And this pillar gets exponentially larger the higher you go. Every time DE make a new content patch, they're adding to this pillar. And new players who are just starting out at the base of this really thin pillar don't get an accurate representation as to what the end of this pillar ends up being. And the more that's put on the end of this pillar, the less sturdy the base becomes. We're left with a situation where new players are playing a completely different game to what veterans and people who've played the game for a long time are playing. And I think this probably is one of the lesser problems that we're going to discuss, but it is very interesting to see that there's a lot that needs doing that can make big changes and improvements to the game. And although we do know that DE are going to be working on the new player experience eventually, it's weird how I don't see this being mentioned about more, because the new player experience is in a bit of a weird state, to say the least, especially by comparison to everything else that needs tweaking and working on. But not to go into too much detail, as it'll take this video to an hour long, really, the early game of Warframe is disjointed and sparsely resembles the game you get to, and creates this falsetto where players can't build themselves to play for long because you're always pulling the end goal away from the new player for every new bit of content that gets added on. That then becomes overwhelming for them, and sometimes simplicity has to be key. And giving an early experience a retune to reflect that could help a lot. So that, in short, is what I think are the major problems facing Warframe right now in my eyes. Some probably more important and forward-facing than others, and I'd be very interested to know what you guys think. what are your concerns? What do we think? Do we have the same concerns? Do we have the same ideals here? Are there problems you think I've missed? Please leave a comment down below and let me know what your thoughts are while we carry on with the rest of this video. So, as I mentioned earlier, I don't want this video to just be one based around the negative. There needs to be a counterbalance to all this so we can constructively discuss all this. So we know the problems, but what can be done about it? Well, that's simple. There's a few things that I've been debating over that I think that could help DE and us a lot here. First of all, DE needs to calm the F down. DE, we love you. We love your game. You wouldn't still be having 40,000 people play concurrently if we didn't. But you have to start listening like you used to. Yes, you have your aspirations and ideals, but it would be blindsided of you not to realize that there needs to be a middle ground where you need to know what your community wants and heed to it, at least in some regard. Otherwise, you get this level of apathy from your community where an update drops, they want this to be the best update that's ever been, but because it didn't meet the expectations because of the previously delayed content, they are disappointed and feel ignored. You have to calm down. Work on 1 or 2 projects at a time. We see what you want to do. We love the ambition. We would much rather get 2 or 3 big shiny updates a year that you put your heart and soul into, rather than what we end up getting where we get promised 12 plus projects and ideas, but only end up getting delivered with 8 of them, and then those 8 being sloppy, lackluster, and just generally feeling misplaced. This also might be my personal point here, but I think we have enough Warframes now. Maybe 1 a year with an awesome quest would be good. But these resources you are putting into frames could be better spent in my eyes. I remember a time when a new Warframe was something to be excited over, and they were met with epic reactions and awesome visuals and quests and just loads of stuff happening and hype and lots of gusto around it. Whereas now, I can't name a single frame in the last 2 or 3 years I've actually been excited over. Put those resources to the gameplay loop affecting content and limit yourself to 1 frame a year. Trust me, people wouldn't mind so much. We already have a massive variety of frames to choose from, not to mention the primes on top of that. I mean, a new frame is not content. New cosmetics are not content. And we are already spoiled for choice with the gameplay themes we have in terms of the type of frames we can play. And at this stage, any new frame just doesn't feel special because every frame has something relevant to another at this stage. There's not been a frame in a while that seems to fill a role that others haven't. Now, I don't want them to stop making frames permanently. Maybe just slow down the amount. You have a great Tenogen community who can create plenty of assets for you. So why not rely on them and lean on them more? You don't have to take the entire world on your shoulders, do you? So that was a bit of a waffle. I hope you guys understand. I really wanted to just go over what I think is currently having issues with the game. And just to go over, I think it's important to then have this counterbalance where I talk about what I like in the game. I'm not gonna lie, there have been some great updates to Warframe recently. Look at the Lich system. Although, yes, it had a bit of an evidence of that sloppy game design initially when it was first launched, the tweaks and updates to it since then have been absolutely fantastic. The Lich system is such an evident boon to the game at the moment. It's a gameplay loop affecting update that gives people a reason to grind, and the grind is fun. There's a fun mechanic to it, there's unique rewards that scale and you can boost them up, and there's actually a semblance of almost like an end game to it where you have a reason to farm something that is significantly harder than everything else, and the liches are actually hard. Yeah, mechanically they may not be too difficult, but they hit like trucks. They require you to build correctly and rewards you for building correctly. So the liches in my eyes are one of the best updates we've had in a long time, and I love the idea behind it. If we can get more of that, I would love it. Maybe develop on it further. We know that it's going to be added into Railjack eventually. So let's see that ambition with that put into everything else. Additionally to that, I love Nightwave. Nightwave is a fantastic mode for being able to earn resources and items in the game. Yes, I do see the ambition that we spoke of earlier being a hindrance here, and obviously you're not able to dedicate the time and resources to it anymore. But Nightwave as a whole is a great concept. Maybe we just need to take it down a little bit and slow it down a little bit so there's more to do, and that where you don't need to update it quite as frequently. Because there are definitely models you can use with a battle pass simulated thing where you don't need to update it as often, and that can then leave you time to basically leave it how it is now, where it's basically one perpetually long battle pass that goes on for a very prolonged period of time. Not to mention, the Nightwave is a fantastic way for newer players to get goals for themselves. They'll see that there are challenges that they are unable to do, or maybe they're just a bit too difficult for them to do at the time. And really, there are ways for this Nightwave to be pushed on even further to give veterans something to look for. And the whole idea of veterans being a bit ignored, it kind of plays into something we spoke about earlier. But with Nightwave, you even have the ideology of helping veterans feel rewarded. You could add elite challenges to Nightwave that are extortionately harder than every other challenge, but give extra rewards. Maybe nothing fancy, maybe just a former or something, but it would be the option of doing something challenging to boast that you've done something that most other players can't. I loved the idea of having a 30-minute Kuva survival without using oxygen. That was a great idea, and it was only removed to pander to the newer player, which is fine. I think the Nightwave does need to be globally accessible by all. But let's maybe have something for the veterans. Give the veterans and the players who have spent a lot of time in the game some harder content that they can push for. And the idea with elite challenges through Nightwave, I think, is one of those ideas that can help there. So with that, guys, I hope this video has been a bit of an insight into my personal aspirations for the game. I hope it's not been too ranty. I hope that maybe you've agreed with some of the things I've said. If you've disagreed, please let me know. I would love to know what you think the game has issues with. And let's use this video as a forum for us to realize those issues. Because the game's not perfect, but we love Warframe. We all do, surely. Otherwise, we wouldn't be discussing it. And I want discussion to be a realization of passion rather than just hatred. And if you do have a distaste for something, if you really feel like you can't play Warframe anymore because you don't agree with the way the game is, or maybe you're bored, take that negativity and play another game. You don't need to play Warframe at the end of the day. We love it, we want it to be the best. But games change. Developers evolve. And you need to evolve with them. If you can't evolve with them, then there are other games. We are human. We evolve, we change, we adapt. So let's take that onwards with us, shall we? And hopefully, I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you have, do all that good stuff. Like, share, drop by our Twitch. There'll be links to my Twitch and Twitter down below if you want to give them a follow. And I'll see all of you top hatters in the next video.